All right, hello everyone, and welcome back. I kind of wanted to react to something that's kind of been bugging me for quite some time now. I've ranted about it to my friends, and I thought, why not? The internet will want to know. So, I was recently watching a Louis Rossman video. If you don't know who he is, he runs a very successful repair shop in New York for computers, and I think he might do phones. I'm not 100% sure. I'll link his stuff in the description below, as well as everything that I reference in this video. Um, he was ranting about how Customs seized one of his shipments for Apple batteries for Macs. I don't exactly know what type of model they were. Long story short, they were seized because they were determined to be counterfeit, and he's going to fight Apple. He's going on and on about how he's not going to take it lying down or whatever. He was ranting, as he always does. It's kind of his thing. It's actually why he's one of my favorite channels. I do like to watch the stuff that he does. About how he's not a fan of Apple. For the non-PG crowd, he fucking hates Apple with all of his guts, with the fiery passion of 1,000 burning suns. And it's all on Apple's apparent stance for right to repair. For people who don't know, right to repair is, I'll give it to you from repair.org. Consumer products, product owners, and independent professionals must have the right to repair, sell, and reuse their products. The Repair Association advocates nationally for competitive repair markets, as well as improvements to the quality and longevity of products. All too often, unusable products and devices, components, blah, 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 are all shredded or tossed away instead of being reused, salvaged, or fixed. We need to make a product that lasts longer. This includes optimizing electronics not only for the first owner, but also the third, fourth, and fifth owner through formal and informal reuse or repair. What this basically means is that these third parties feel that companies should be required to, at the very least, support their products much longer than they do, or to make it much easier for consumers to repair their own products, albeit with first-party or third-party components. So what they're saying is that, for instance, with the batteries, Apple should be required to provide batteries direct from them to third parties if the company Apple itself isn't going to be the one who's going to repair something. That's basically what it means in a nutshell. Now, I get that people want to get as much as they can out of their products, especially if they're spending $1,000 to $5,000 on them. I get that. So before you come for me, just understand that I get that. But we're talking about products that dating back 8, 9, 10 years. Computers that with processors that were designed for an internet that existed mostly on DSL and dial-up connections. Products that were designed to run with 2 gigs of RAM instead of the standard 8 or the more preferable 16 nowadays. We're talking about those types of products. So when it comes to the right to repair, yes, you should be able to get the most out of the things that you have, but at a certain point, things do die. In his video, he makes a reference to something that Apple wouldn't repair. He was working in collaboration with CBC, which I believe is the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, on about how an Apple store wanted to charge a customer somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think it was like $1,200 to $2,000 or something like that, to repair his machine when all it was determined that was needed was a cable repair or replacement because the display cable had come unconnected or become bent, something like that.
Hi. A few days ago, we published a piece with CBC that showcased how the Apple Store was trying to charge somebody between $1,200 to $2,000 for a machine that needed nothing other than an LCD display cable.
I'm not as familiar with other companies as I am with Apple's policies. Apple will service a device according to their vintage and obsolete product guide, which is readily available on their website, as are most of their support articles, that basically goes on to state that Apple will support the hardware on a product for up to 5 years after that product has finished being manufactured. So, say for instance, a product stops being manufactured in, say, 2010. Apple will support the hardware on that product up until 2015. But we're not talking about something that would, in this instance, be purchased in 2010. We're talking about something that could have been purchased, say, in 2005, and Apple made this exact same model for 5 years. So you have something that's from 2005. Hardware is the same, configuration, all of that stuff. You decided to buy something that was from that date. You go fast forward into the future, 5 years. Everything works fine. You are an additional 5 years down the line. At this point, this computer's hardware is 10 years old. This is 10-year-old technology that we're talking about. That's the type of stuff that these third parties are wanting Apple and other companies to repair. Now, according to Apple's page, owners of iPhones, iPads, iPods, or Mac products may obtain service or parts from Apple or Apple authorized service providers for 5 years after the product is no longer manufactured or where required by law. There's some wonky things going on in California with vintage products, but that's about it in the United States. Apple discontinued support for certain technologically obsolete and vintage products. If you read a little further into the article, what you're going to find is that Apple considers something vintage after 5 years, which basically means that it's no longer serviceable through Apple, but third parties may still be able to service it. If you read their article, which I'll also link in the bottom, you'll see that it doesn't make any stipulations for third parties not being able to repair them. However, if you go down a little bit more, that's when we get into what's called the obsolete realm. When something is obsolete, it's 7 years after it's been produced. And a direct quote from this same article explains the following: that Apple has discontinued all hardware service for obsolete products with no exceptions. Service providers cannot obtain or order parts for obsolete products. So let's put that into perspective. This means that for 5 fucking years after Apple stops manufacturing something, so in my previous representation, we're talking about something that's 10 years old at this point. No longer has to produce, they no longer produce the hardware for it. You won't be able to get it repaired through Apple, things like that. What this is saying is, let's go ahead and take a deeper look into that. The 2013 Mac Pro is still in production. You can still buy a brand new one directly from Apple out of the box today. Hardware designed from 2013. It's a Mac Pro machine. It's a Pro hardware from 2013. Okay. That was, what year is this? 2018? So we're talking 5 years ago. You buy it new today, you get another 5 years. If Apple discontinues it today, you get another 5 years of hardware support for this product. So we're talking a product from 2013 with hardware that was designed for 2013 being supported all the way out to, what are we talking here, 2022? If you were to buy it today, and that's presuming that Apple discontinues it today. If they continue this model for another 5 years, the 2013 machine that you bought is going to be supported up until 2022 as just the regular support for it. And then 5 years after that, 2027 is when Apple would stop supporting the hardware for that product. A machine of 14 years. Hardware for 14 years is what we're talking here. These are the types of things that people are talking about that Apple should be required to repair. Apple should make it easier for third parties to repair. Now, I understand that Apple has some major fallings in the past, especially recently, with a well-known debacle with Linus Sebastian from Linus Tech Tips, Tech Quickie, and there's another one that I forget. I apologize, Linus. You're one of my favorite channels. But yes, he's one of my favorite channels where he purchased an iMac Pro. They were taking it apart, trying to put it back together. When they tried to put it back together, they made a contact that caused the machine to spark, that caused the display to be dropped by the person reassembling it, and he cracked the display, and it caused some other internal damage that required the board to be replaced. Linus fully agreed that they had done this, that they knew that they would have to pay out of pocket. Apple, however, would not allow this.
They refused to fix it. And we're not even talking warranty service. We understood we would have to pay. We wanted to pay.
Apple didn't have the support structure at the time to repair it directly at one of its stores. And because of the way that Apple handles its products and its repairs, say if you're an authorized service provider, one, you have to have somebody who's certified to actually work on the product, which no authorized service providers did at the time that they actually purchased this machine and caused the damage to it. So there's one failing on Apple's part. They didn't have the support structure. Secondly, with those authorized service providers, not only do they have to have somebody who is going to be able to be certified to repair the machine, they have to take the components out of the machine that they want to repair, send them directly to Apple. Apple verifies the authenticity of these components, sends them a replacement component, and that's what's used to repair. They can't keep repair component stock on site. They have to send something in before they can get something back. Apple does this so that they're able to control the amount of product, the authenticity of its products, of the hardware that's being used to repair them, so that you don't get a shoddy experience from something like that. Now, going through all of this, there's several videos, which I'll link, that they ended up having to, him and Louis Rossman actually went through some shady backdoor deals. I'm not exactly certain how they managed to do it. They won't discuss it for good reason. The people who got them these products, who got them these components, have a target on their backs, if you will, from Apple, because of the fact that Apple controls what it is that they do so tightly. So they had to go through some back doors. They ended up being able to get all of the components that they needed to get everything resituated back into this machine. They eventually got it up and running. That's a failing on Apple's part. This customer purchased a machine that they knew that they damaged, that they wanted to pay to have repaired, but they wouldn't. Apple just wouldn't do it because they couldn't do it. They didn't have anyone who was able to do it for them. That is a failing on Apple's part. Another one is where Snazzy Labs, who took his machine into an Apple store. It was an iMac Pro. It was mounted on a wall mounting bracket, like a Vesa mount type deal. They told him that they fixed it. Long story short, it was a debacle. They ended up causing more damage to the machine than what was already there.
So I call the store and I ask him what's up. The guy on the phone tells me that they had already attempted the repair, but, quote, failed to perform it correctly.
Apple eventually replaced his machine because of this, but he was still not a fan. It left a bad taste in his mouth, as well it should. You don't spend $5,000, $10,000, $30,000 on a product without some type of expectation that it's at least going to function, and that all of the features that were supported for it are going to be present and accounted for. So I get it. I get that Apple has made some mistakes in the past. I understand. But that's not to say that all of these go towards letting you know that a giant can bleed. Apple is huge, one of the biggest tech companies in the world. Every company suffers failings. A company the size of Apple should not have had something like this happen. It's just unacceptable. I get where he's coming from on that. These are machines that are still supported. They were brand new at the time. There's no reason that Apple shouldn't have supported them. But ultimately, the fault lies with consumers. If we voluntarily buy into an ecosystem, why should we have any expectation that that ecosystem, as well defined as it is with a company like Apple, should have any expectation of having a change to it? We're telling this company that everything's fine. It would be fine, say, if we all stopped buying Apple products. Apple would have to take a hard look at themselves and say, there's a reason that people have decided to shy away from us as a company. This is what I'm trying to get across. This is the whole crux of where right to repair comes from. Why should a company be requested to forfeit its ability to control a customer experience because, say, an individual with an 8 or more year old machine wants to replace the battery in it. And that's what it all boils down to. If you make the choice to buy into an ecosystem, then you make the choice to be governed by the rules of that ecosystem. There's no reason that you should expect a company to provide its hardware, its software, its intellectual property to denigrate the experience that somebody is going to have on a machine after that machine has started to fail, when that's totally expected product behavior for something as it ages, to allow a third party to make changes to that product. That's not an expectation that you should have. You have no one to blame but yourself if you make the choice, if you decide to go into an ecosystem that you know is as restricted and locked down as the one that Apple is. I get it. I get that everybody wants to get the most out of what they can. I understand that. But for machines, devices, and manufacturers to lend themselves to a third-party repair it's not something that they should be required to do. No company should be required to sell what it is that they manufacture, what it is that they design, to somebody else to use as a replacement when that company no longer supports something. You understood when you purchased that your machine, say, has a 1-year warranty. Your display goes out 16 months down the line. You understood that something you purchased was only covered for that short period of time, or that long period of time, depending on how you look at it. Now, for companies that support this type of thing, like for instance for Samsung, who will be the first to refer you to a third party, say for a screen repair on one of your Galaxy devices, that's all fantastic. If they refer you to a third party because they don't have near the direct support structure that a company like Apple would, that's perfectly fine. I understand that. More power to them. Fantastic for you. But for a company with the vested interest in its products like Apple has, there is absolutely no reason that it should be required to make alterations to that practice so that it's easier for somebody else who Apple has not certified, or who Apple has not tested, or who Apple has not reviewed, to make changes to a product that that company is ultimately proud of. There's no reason that that should be the case, and there's no reason that you should think that that should be the case. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is personal responsibility. If you choose to go into an ecosystem that you know is as locked down and restricted as the one that Apple is, there's absolutely no reason that you should expect that that company should have to make a change to the way that they handle their business, simply because it doesn't make you happy that your computer is now 5 or 6 years old and you want something in it replaced. I support personal responsibility. I support a company's right to determine how its products are supported. I support your right to choose. That's what it is. You have the right to choose, but it's just that, a choice. Choose to let Apple know that you don't like their practices through your actions. Don't buy into their products and then complain that their products aren't what you thought that they were going to be, when you knew full well that they weren't going to be what your expectations were in the first place. If you choose to not buy Apple products, they're going to change the way that they do things, because they have an interest in their customer experience just as much as they have an interest in their $1 trillion valuation. Again, thank you guys for showing up for this rant. I appreciate your time. Have a good one, guys. Bye.